Be able to get a boost the first time that you use an attack after that. So definitely something can be dealing a lot of damage. But here we go. It's time to get started with our next round here. Right away, it's going to be that Cornerstone Ogre Bond hitting the field next to Calyrex, Miraidon, or Shifu on Agati's end.
So pretty safe matchup for Arash here. Give him the opportunity if he wants to try to set up that Trick Room. But how much will he trade to do it, right? If both Pokemon to attack, potentially to could lose that Ogre Pond immediately. And also, one of the great things about Miraidon with a high likelihood of locking into Volt Switch here, can bring in some other Pokemon to help deal with a potential Trick Room.
And that's the thing. There's not really a way to really prevent it, but if you at least have this option of switching out and having something a little bit more attuned to the situation, that can help out. Right away, Terrestrialization be kicking off the match. It will be the Calyrex Ice Rider. This one into the Fire type. All right, follow me, Ogre Pond. Terrestrialization staying safe regardless, making sure all the attention has gone over to it as the Volt Switch going to be the move of choice. A lot of damage, even though it's not very effective. That's going to be thanks to that critical hit. As now we're going to go back and an opportunity to see what Agati has here in the back.
Yeah, there's some good information here. We're going to see the Incineroar coming on the field, dropping and Intimidate. And while this Ogre Pond may not be long for the battle, Calyrex is going to be free to do whatever it wants.
It will be the Incineroar that hits the field, but Clear Amulet onto that Calyrex is going to make sure that attack is not dropped. So it will be able to still hit at full force once it gets this Trick Room done and over with. The second hit into the Ogre Pond is going to be it, but no Trick Room. Instead, we're going out onto the Eventual. Glacial Lances, not very effective into these Pokemon, but still a considerable amount of damage into that Urshifu, bringing it down to about a third of its health.
Yeah, the Clear Amulet kind of paying dividends there, just a little bit of chip, but Urshifu now in a position where a second Glacial Lance, if Arash was able to get it off, could perhaps pick up that knockout.
Right, and I'm curious too, looking at this situation with that Calyrex not going for the Trick Room on that turn, because it is a slower Pokemon, and when we're kind of eyeing up the Pokemon on Agati's end, specifically when I look at that Miraidon, it's something that can maybe fare quite well. We get an opportunity to see now, though, there is that Iron Hands as well. So that is a Pokemon that can do well in the Trick Room situation. So maybe just wanting to kind of soften the Pokemon up. So once that Urshifu hits the field, you can start taking these big KOs.
Yeah, meanwhile, you see a situation here which normally would be a great protecting turn, but since Urshifu's ability sort of prevents that, it's going to get a free blow on one of these Pokemon.
And that's going to be the close combat into the Calyrex, Fire, Terrestrialization, and just the natural bulk's going to take it quite well. As of course, Urshifu now, that's going to be the defense that's lowered. We're not about the attacking anymore. Calyrex, that will now be the Trick Rooms. The dimensions are twisted. It's going to be slower Pokemon moving first from here on out.
Yeah, kind of a nice little trade for Arash, perhaps, getting to use that Trick Room a turn later. If we can wind up in a situation where it's in danger of expiring, using the moves in that order where you would have gotten the same damage anyway, but now effectively just gets an extra turn of Trick Room by using them the way he did.
And that can be so nice. And it's nice, too, because with this Incineroar coming in the previous turn and it's already used its Fake Out, you're not wasting one of your Trick Room turns by, well, being prevented by this Trick Room, right? And since you've already damaged the Urshifu so much over onto Gabriel's end of the board, another Glacial Lance will be able to go ahead and pick this off, and the Urshifu that you have should be able to deal with the Incineroar quite handily. The Urshifu, though, on this turn, just wants to be swapping out an opportunity to get a fourth final Pokemon in. That's going to be the Rillaboom.
Interesting. So perhaps trying to stay a step ahead, we'll be able to threaten a Fake Out on the next turn.
Yep, and being able to prevent things. It will be protect this time around. Do note that is not going to be helpful against that Urshifu, but it will be useful up against the Sucker Punch. If you're not ready in attack, nothing's going to be happening at that point. So the Sucker Punch, null and void, and the follow-up knockoff, not going to do anything either. And now you have that prevention to be able to stop one of those Pokemon. So great swapping coming out from Arash.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it doesn't look like a whole lot happened there, but, gets the Grassy Terrain active, which helped you. He'd already taken a bunch of damage on his key Pokemon, gets the Fake Out threatening the other direction, and perhaps avoids taking a knockout that would have, even though it would have been nice in the short term, perhaps would have made it more difficult for him to keep momentum here. Spent the turn of Trick Room, but now likely threatening a potential knockout in that Urshifu slot, and Rillaboom able to use Fake Out now, probably on the Incineroar to prevent that knockoff from happening.
One thing to note, though, is we do have the Terra Ghost over onto the Incineroar. So you do have the option of trying to go for the Terastallization, but Arash can then kind of call into that as well and go into the other slot. It's not going to be the fake out, though. Instead, just a smidge of chip going into that Incineroar. And damage dealt in return thanks to that Rocky Helmet. Sucker Punch won't be too much into the Calyrex, but now the Glacial Lance. It was already so much softened up into the Urshifu. That is going to be KO'd. Incineroar now out to a third of its health. Not taking nearly enough damage from either of those two Pokemon. Chilling Nay, though. That's going to be the first attack boost going over to that Calyrex, which does hang on through the turn. The clear amulet's gone, but Calyrex holds on.
And maybe just enough HP. You know, see the impact of the grassy terrain there is Calyrex just holding on by a thread, and hey, you know, Iron Hand's going to come out now, and maybe you're not so upset if you're Agati here, right? You've almost knocked out this Calyrex. You're going to be able to most likely burn a turn here with help from the fake out, and there still is that Murata in the back. However, you got to be careful not to lose too many Pokemon here either, right? You know, there's still a very healthy Rillaboom on Arash's side of the field, and eventually, if you're looking toward a win condition where you need Murata to close the game, you'd certainly prefer to keep your terrain active and not allow the grassy terrain to come on and slow things down.
And that's kind of one of those things that when we're looking at why Rillaboom can fare so well into the Miraidon is that capability of just going and rewriting that terrain. Protect again. So there's been two turns throughout this Trick Room that Arash has had to go for the Protect to make sure that the Calyrex isn't going to be getting KO'd here, as the first attack does go on hit into it. Flare Blitz is going to be the follow-up. Incineroar targeting into Rillaboom instead. Super effective, but still a sliver. Some huge survivals coming on through. And that's going to allow the Woodhammer. You're going to knock yourself out with some recoil, but great damage into that Iron Hands. And now a free swap to bring the Urshifu back in.
Yeah, it's trading Pokemon quickly now, where kind of a fascinating little situation here where Calyrex kind of forced to go on the defensive there. And maybe both sides make a little mix-up, right? There's no fake out, but also, I mean, that damage trade, the recoil really relevant. And now, if Agati wants to, he's able to control the terrain later once Miraidon comes back in.
And I believe this is the final turn of Trick Room. So once this Trick Room is done, well, the Urshifu should be in a great position to be outspeeding at least the current Pokemon out on the field, though you are still in a really dangerous situation once that Miraidon comes back out. And I think that's kind of what I'm eyeing up the most here in this situation. And at this point, Agati has taken a lot of momentum. Hasn't even used Terastallization yet.
Yeah, and I think that makes this really scary. Arash really doesn't want to allow that Iron Hands to attack, potentially pick up a knockout on this Calyrex. I think the Urshifu is going to have a really difficult time winning any potential 1v2 here, so potentially a game-winning turn for Agati.
All right, we still got to make it official. Terastallization into that Iron Hands. Going to go ahead and Terastallize into that Terra Water. More so a defensive type coming on out. Try and make sure you're not going to be taking too much from these two on the other end. Aqua Jet's going to be first. Negligible damage. Nothing happening there. Is the Wild Charge follow-up. The Calyrex already so low. That's going to be the KO confirmed. And Ommati down to his final Pokemon.
Yeah, it's looking tough for Arash in this first game. Incineroar as well, you know, kind of just sitting there like, hey, wait for me, I get a turn too. Flare Blitz not going to do too much here, but we'll continue whittling down this Urshifu. I guess not breaking the sash, but, you know, helping things along a little bit. And you know, both trainers do at least confirm the speed order that Iron Hands out-slowing, I guess, the Calyrex on the other side of the field. It's kind of one of the adjustments we've seen throughout the course of regulation. The Iron Hands often running slower builds, and we're really seeing it pay off in this first game.
Yeah, which is then really interesting looking at that Trick Room, because it was a Trick Room that, if it had been a turn sooner, actually, then you would have had the situation that the Urshifu could have maybe started dealing some damage in this endgame that it could have been. The Calyrex still making it on through, but this Iron Hands that Agati had in response, great job to be countering the Trick Room in the situation, bringing it out at the opportune moment. And Arash is forced to continuously be protecting this Calyrex and just being put on the back foot. So when I'm looking at the situation, I'm curious with how this game 2 is going to be shaking up. The Cornerstone Ogerpon as well was a Pokemon that was essentially right from the get-go as a 3v4, because that was a Pokemon that got doubled into turn 1 because of the Follow Me. And you didn't really get much from it.
Yeah, I thought that turn 1 was devastating. I think that it's just really tough for Arash to win if they were both to lead the same Pokemon again in this next game. I think Agati's plan was really good, right? It's like two great Pokemon at helping deal with the Trick Room and back, gets to attack for free with the Miraidon. It was still there hanging out in the back. We never got to see it, but it still would have been a big problem with actually closing the game. And there wound up being so much pressure on the Calyrex, it was really difficult for it to actually attack. I think given the Pokemon that wound up being in the back, we're talking the beginning of the game about how well Arash had delayed that Trick Room. Maybe you should have just delayed it infinitely and not used it at all there, right? Where it wound up kind of not only wasting a turn where Calyrex could have done some damage, but also just put him in a challenging spot where the speed control is more controlling Calyrex than it was Calyrex's opponents.
Yeah, and I'm still even just looking at the fact that Gabriel, from the get-go, the Miraidon, Volt Switch, damage, I'm out. And even if Arash was able to get a little bit more headway in that Trick Room, the second it was done, there was still going to be that Miraidon in the back. So that's going to be something that I look to see answered here in this next game. And I definitely agree. If there is the Trick Room going out, I don't like it going up against this Iron Hands, but we do have to be finding a way that Calyrex can be set up for a little bit more success. We might see a deviation in the play, but it's not going to be in the leads, as yet again coming out from Arash. Cornerstone Ogerpon, Calyrex, and this will be going off against the double figure opportunity here from Agati, Incineroar, and Iron Hands.
Yeah, I mean, weird that kind of like this at least a little bit more if you're Arash. I mean, it probably even less excited about trying to use the Trick Room this time, where now both of the Pokemon that wound up being out and slowing down that Trick Room are just hanging out in the field. But because of that, the turn order is somewhat advantageous for Arash, and he gets some information, right? You have to try to figure out the 4 Pokemon that Agati has brought. You've got to assume Miraidon is one of the 2 that are missing, so immediately he knows probably a very similar game plan to the previous game.
I'd be eyeing up here too, because coming out from Arash, when you're staring down this double fake out, it could just be really easy. Okay, Spiky Shield Protect and just make sure nothing's going to be happening. But if you also think that there is going to be this swap, you don't really want to give one over for free, so you could go ahead and make a call, and a guy has definitely ways to potentially punish off of that. It's going to be Terrestrialization yet again, making sure this Calyrex Ice Rider, it's heating up as much as possible. Fire type, you're not looking to be taking super effective hits from this lead combination, which also shows that it's not going to be protected. It will be fake out to stop it and distract instead as Ivy Cudgel. All right, I like that. It's super effective, but thanks to that Intimidate and no critical hit, will not get the KO, and that's going to be a lot of damage in return.
These Pokemon are angry.
Right?
Yeah, for what you normally don't think of as like 2 highly offensive Pokemon, Ogerpon nearly picking up a 1-hit knockout. Hey, if it had gotten the added effect of that Ivy Cudgel, the increased critical hit rate, it would have. And then Iron Hands hitting back awful hard itself, knocking it down to the Focus Sash. And wow, it's an interesting start to this battle.
It definitely is, and for the Incineroar, when you're looking at ways to be slowing down, is maybe something you don't want to be losing from the get-go, but you do need to be dealing with this Ogerpon sooner rather than later, and the Iron Hands wouldn't appreciate this hit either. And if you take the turn to swap out the Incineroar, the Iron Hands, it's not going to be faring the greatest for a double up going off. So
yeah, it's pretty scary, right? Because I think anything potentially that Agati has in the back, the combination of one of Ogerpon's attacks and Calyrex could be a knockout. So yeah, kind of just have to give the Incineroar up here. Don't want to risk throwing the game on the second turn.
Well, that means there's not going to be any knockoff from that Clear Amulet, and there's not going to be a way to be slowing that attack from that Calyrex. This is Fire Off's first Glacial Lance of the match. Single target, a lot of damage into the Iron Hands. Drain Punch in retaliation, not going to be dealing that super effective thanks to Terra, but it will still get some healing back, though it will not survive another Glacial Lance.
Yeah, that's a pretty scary situation now, right? The Ogerpon still has that solitary hit point, which could make a big difference here. So see Miraidon entering the field, could pull away whatever attack it is. You'd assume it's probably a Volt Switch, but that will allow this Calyrex potentially to attack again. And even though it won't do quite as much damage to the Iron Hands as it did last time, because it will be a normal Glacial Lance attacking 2 different targets, that's potentially a lot of free damage once again.
And that's going to be a dangerous situation with that Miraidon. And even at this point, if you want to go for the Volt Switch, we already saw how much damage the Urshifu even took from something like that Calyrex, to where that's going to be dangerous as well. And if you're forced to be just taking that damage over and over, I mean, Arash still has this lead out. This Ogerpon has definitely been such a threat. So really dangerous situation coming on through. You could go for something like a spread damage attack. You do have access to that Dazzling Gleam, but because of that Terra Fire, you're not going to be dealing in nearly enough damage.
Yeah, it's also mostly slower Pokemon on the Agati side, right? If you're kind of working toward, well, how can he feasibly win the game? He doesn't know 2 of Arash's Pokemon. If he has something quicker there, we may be in a situation where Miraidon needs an awful lot of work in this match.
All right, that is going to be the Cornerstone Ogerpon acting first. Horn Leech soften up this Iron Hands just a little bit more, but it could not hear nearly enough. That is going to be an easy KO for the Miraidon. Volt Switch, get it out of there. Miraidon's going to be swapping out. It will be Urshifu rejoining the battle, but it's going to be, assumingly, another Glacial Lance. And that is definitely an Iron Hands, but then soften up enough to be not taking this hit. No Trick Room in sight, all out offensive. I think he heard you. So much damage for the Urshifu.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge knockout there. Now, Agati down to his last two Pokemon. Arash finally going to have to replace one of his as he gets that boost from the knockout. And this is a tough spot, right? Where Miraidon going to have to lock into a move now with those choice specs, no longer going to be able to zip in and out of battle. And Arash has all the information he needs now to make the best game plan he can, given the Pokemon he selected.
And considering we saw the Rillaboom in the match number 1, not too surprised to see it coming out here onto the field. So you do have this fake out option as well to make sure that one of these Pokemon cannot act. And with the Miraidon being that choice item, seemed like an obvious hit into that as well. And with that speed interactions, of course, them both hitting the field at the same time, the Rillaboom will have that second terrain. So that will be the grassy terrain to make sure the Miraidon furthermore doesn't get to do what it wants.
Yeah, it's a really tense decision now for Agati. We're like, oh geez, what do I want to lock into? What do I want to predict? Gets faked out here. Potentially a very difficult turn, but he's gonna have to make an amazing call to keep himself in this one.
Ooh, well, already we'll have to see how this call works out. Terra Stellar onto the Urshifu. So again, this is going to deal a lot of damage for the first one, but no, instead it will be fake out into that slot. Nothing coming out from that, but it's not going to be a risk of getting KO'd as the Draco Meteor, the Connect, and Calyrex goes down. Final 2 Pokemon for both our trainers.
Yeah, so it's getting a little more interesting now, right? We have the same amount of Pokemon left on both sides. Miraidon will be locked into that Draco Meteor, but we see how much damage it does at its normal level of special attack, now going to be dealing with increasingly reduced special attack for the remainder of the game. So can this Urshifu with so little HP still make a difference in this game? Going to be tough, facing down 2 Pokemon known for their ability to use attacks with increased priority.
Well, at this point, too, so much damage has been done into that Urshifu, and the Rillaboom does have the Grassy Glide to try and just pick it off. And the Urshifu over on Ommati's end, even if it definitely would not appreciate a hit from the Miraidon, it does have the Focus Sash, so it will take one hit. It's going to be the one to fire off an Aqua Jet first into the opposing Urshifu. It's going to be hanging on, but the Sucker Punch that was fired off is going to fail. All the priorities coming on out, and it's going to be the second one from the Rillaboom to seal the deal there.
Sort of a strange looking turn there, but it winds up going very well. And yeah, now Miraidon's going to need to knock out 2 Pokemon. Oh no, it's not going to knock out any Pokemon there. Whiffs the Draco Meteor, fails to break the Focus Sash with the Urshifu, and I think we're going to see a Game 3.
It just didn't want to go that -4, right? It knew that the damage was not going to be there. So instead, miss, get out of there. But I think, too, with the amount of damage that it would have had to do, that it would have been locked in the bag. And I'm so excited we get to see a Game 3, especially, too, with how differently they panned out. With just that switch of not going for that Trick Room. The Iron Hand, I mean, it just got picked off so easily. And I loved as well that the other big switch that we didn't necessarily get to talk about from the get-go, but was so impactful, was that Ogerpon. It basically did nothing in the game 1. Okay, I kept the Calyrex safe for 1 turn, didn't matter. But this time, instead, those Ivy Cudgels and taking care of that Incineroar from the get-go was so huge. And from there, I mean, the damage just stacked up. Arash was clearly in the lead from there.
Yeah, I thought it was a really well-played game, and I think that unfortunately for Agati, the adjustment just really didn't work there, right? There's no threat, or it didn't really create like the situation where Arash felt like he needed a Trick Room, right? Where perhaps if Miraidon had started out on the battlefield, at least he's got to make a more difficult decision. But there's no need to Trick Room in front of those 2 Pokemon, right? So he doesn't really even bait the opportunity. I think and nice thing about winning the first game is that you can afford to experiment a little bit more in that second one. Maybe he expected Arash to switch things up more, but instead basically got exactly the same plan as the first game, and it just worked this time because it was Agati who kind of misadjusted himself into a loss.
I mean, you definitely could afford to take a loss, but now it's going to be a tough one because I think that even from the get-go, I mean, that Ivy Cudgel, it didn't get the KO the first time around, but it has increased critical hit chances. So it could have even been more of a one-sided match from that moment to where Agati has to be so careful going on into this. And if you know now that Arash doesn't necessarily want to go for that Trick Room mode because you showed that you can answer it, where are you going to make the adjustment this time around? It's time for Game 3. See who's coming out on top. And big adjustment, Iron Treads, of all Pokemon, making its appearance at the World Championships. Paired up with that Miraidon. All right, let's get to it.
The hero has arrived. So very excited to see this Pokemon appear in this game. And creates a very interesting situation here. With the speed increasing with that Quark Drive, I think there's a real chance the Iron Treads may actually be the quickest Pokemon on the field now. And that Ogerpon creates some interesting situation, right? It still does have the effective focus dash with the sturdy abilities, so Agripon and continue the pace of the battle forward.
And this Calyrex, whether it wants to terrestrialize or not, doesn't look great up against this Iron Treads if you're eyeing up something like this Rock Slide, which I think is going to be huge in this. And since it is a spread damage attack, the Agripon can't really sway it away. So the Calyrex, if you want to make sure you're not taking a lot of damage, you do have to go for that protect. Rock Slide's only going to be hitting the 1 now, and it is going to essentially break that sturdy of this Cornerstone Ogre. Okay, guess not. Okay, that's going to be a big miss. Horn Leech in return is going to be the damage dealt.
Yeah, pretty strange to see Miraidon as the last moving Pokemon in a turn. Right? Not just slower than the partner with the boosted speed, but actually just naturally slower than the Agripon. And, you know, a strange turn, you know, probably expecting to get a mostly guaranteed knockout on that Agripon. Fairly unlikely that Horn Leech would have healed enough to negate that Rock Slide, but hey, you know, not the end of the world. Avoided incorrectly attacking that protect, and now one of these two Pokemon come in. We see the Pokemon that got dropped from the previous 2 games is that Incineroar, so no longer willing to take Ivy Cudgels, instead choosing to bring these other Pokemon, but because of that, Ograpon's still not in that bad of a spot.
I mean, if we can connect the Rock Slides from here on out, maybe it could be fine, especially, too, if the Agripon, if you're readying up an attack, bringing out the Urshifu, you do have the Sucker Punch, which would deal a priority. So you do have to be a little bit careful, because if it doesn't ready it up, it's a little tricky.
Yeah, and Iron Fist being faster because of that ability is a big deal, right? Because it's going to make this turnover a little awkward. If it is able to knock out Agripon, then even with a Follow Me, it would allow the Urshifu to take a swing at this Calyrex, and you know, even if it were to terrestrialize to improve its type matchup, it's still a lot of damage on a critical Pokemon. And it's a tough spot for Arash, right? Because even if assuming the Rillaboom's in the back, it's really difficult to get that back out there, and it's no longer worth it just to turn off the ability, because then you don't have the right combination of Pokemon out to exploit it. But Calyrex having to flee because of the huge threat of Iron Treads.
Words you didn't thought you'd say this weekend, huh? I don't know. I definitely don't know my choice band Rock Slide, Iron Tread, calculations. That is going to be at this point, though. Rillaboom coming on in, and with that Grassy Terrain, the Quark Drive is gone, and the speed is going to be reduced from that Pokemon. So it will be that Cornerstone Agripon to act first, hitting into the other slot. It will get a good amount of health back, and all right, maybe I don't need to know how much this Rock Slide does for a lot of Pokemon, because those two took it so well, and no flinch. Like it's too slow. It can't flinch.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely how it felt when I used Iron Treads. Like, hey, bud, give me a little more damage maybe, but still, you know, a decent chunk there. And now we have things reversed where it's the Rillaboom out on the field, and perhaps Miraidon could switch back in, reactivate that ability. You know, if you get a fake out into what is currently the Urshifu slot, allowing this Iron Treads to get an attack off, it could be a huge swing. So we'll have to see what this Rillaboom does.
Well, at least with the Rillaboom out on the field, it's safe. Miraidon back in, Electric Terrain activated, Cork Drive, get your speed back and have the fastest Rock Slide. Try and just deal that little bit of damage. Try and go for those flinches. Because, hey, if you're locked into this move with this Joyce Band, you might as well go for it. But really smart swap. Already the Rillaboom going to be switching out Urshifu back out onto the field. You don't necessarily want to be taking a hit here, but you will. Rock Slide is going to break that Focus Sash, bring Agripon just down a little bit lower, but so much damage done in return.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard where there's a Rock Slide, there's a way, but that wound up being a mostly negated turn. It does break the Focus Sash of the Urshifu, but otherwise not too big of a deal. And critically, Rillaboom gets out of battle without losing too much momentum, right? In this matchup between Miraidon and Rillaboom, it is kind of valuable to have your terrain Pokemon in the back so you keep getting control. And Miraidon will get a chance to attack here potentially, but doesn't get a whole lot out of its time out of the battle. And if Arash wants to, he can bring Rillaboom right back out there, reduce the damage to his attack.
And that's the weird thing, too, because since the Iron Trends is actually just relying on that Quark Drive for the speed, the second the Rillaboom hits the field again, that Cornerstone Agripon is going to be outspeeding. No swap, though. Detect for the Urshifu instead. Make sure not going to be taking damage past that turn. Maybe eyeing up something like that Volt Switch, and you not wanting to take that hit. And that's not going to be enough damage. The Rock Slide into the Agripon, but it will finally get that flinch. Miraidon now, Dazzling Gleam, spread damage attack. Sure, it lived, but it's going to be taken care of now. Maybe there is a way with these Rock Slides.
Yeah, the flinch is big, although I think it really wanted that non-protect there, or non-detect, I guess, where that would likely have been a double knockout. Instead, now the Urshifu going to be able to get out of his turn safely, and regardless of which of the two Pokemon Arash chooses to send out first, I assume it's fairly likely we see Rillaboom in a hurry here to change the terrain back.
It's weird though at this point because now even if you do swap it out with the terrain, the Iron Trends will still be able to kind of threaten this damage. So you kind of want to try and take care of this Iron Trench sooner rather than later, but then the Calyrex doesn't get to do anything.
Yeah, I wonder if you go for the, Iron Trench's defense is very high. It's its highest stat. Like for, I don't know if Aqua Jet KOs here. If it did, that would really open things up, but I think that would probably be too risky. It's a really difficult turn where things are looking a little shaky for Agati for a while, but he may have found enough window because of Iron Treads.
Yeah, that just damage that stacked up over time, and the Horn Leech unable to quite be taking the KO. Terastallization now coming on out, and it's going to be into this Terra Fairy. So the Dazzling Gleams that you're locked into are going to be doing more damage as well. You're not going to be taking super effective hit from something like a Glacial Lance. Time to see how much damage, but not quite. We'll put that on hold. Another Terastallization. Normally it's been the Calyrex, and yet again, Terra Fire coming on out.
Yeah, it's gaining a resistance to the Dazzling Gleam, which not quite how you normally use this Terra, but definitely does improve the situation significantly for Arash.
Aqua Jet, does it pick up the KO? It will. So the Iron Treads does go down. So the Terra Fire making sure that, hey, you're not going to worry about that Rock Slide. And this Dazzling Gleam coming on out, you'll take this hit well. The Urshifu doesn't, though. Super effective on that Pokemon. Now Arash down to final 2 as Rillaboom will be forced to re-hit the field.
Yeah, it's a huge knockout, though. Not only is the Trick Room going to activate here, make Calyrex one of the quickest Pokemon for the remainder of this battle, although we see now it is that Iron Hands as Agati's final Pokemon, so it will, once again, out-slow Calyrex. But Rillaboom, at least, it's been pretty damaged, but going to be able to flip this terrain for the final time. And Miranda now, even though it does a shockingly good job of avoiding damage despite not getting direct assistance from teammates, going to be locked into a move for the rest of this game that Calyrex resists.
I mean, even at this point, the Rillaboom hitting the field, yeah, you've changed the terrain, but the Miraidon's already hitting with the Dazzling Gleams anyways, and eyeing up the Rillaboom otherwise, the Iron Hands is going to be the quote-unquote faster fake out, being the slowest thing on the field. So you can't just fake out the Rillaboom and just go for the KO to have this 3v1 situation, especially since you have used the Terastallization to take the hit better from the Calyrex.
Yeah, I think the Iron Hands is probably the Pokemon to beat in this matchup. Even though it was, once again, Arash who used the Trick Room, I think getting it off the field is going to be a huge pain.
All right, this situation, instead of going for the damage for the KO, we're going to play it safe. It's going to be the switch coming on out, and Urshifu joining back out onto the field. Reminder, Trick Room is up, but the Calyrex will be protecting on this turn, making sure the fake out's not going to be hitting into it, as that is the attempt coming out from Agati. The Rillaboom will be the only one to act this time around. Looks like it's going to be going for that damage as Wood Hammer, boosted by the terrain, critical hit, but the Iron Hands will hold on, but the Rillaboom won't.
Oh, the crit mattered, but in the wrong direction there. I was just going to say how much I love that read by Arash, but I think he actually kind of gets hosed by his own critical hit. I think because of that, Rillaboom is knocked out what it otherwise would not have been, and he does get that 3v1, despite not getting any damage of his own on the field. What a strange turn.
I've never had a situation where maybe like, look, they're not a critical hit, but that is absolutely rough, especially too, you need that Wood Hammer damage onto the Iron Hands. That is something that can take these hits so well otherwise, so you kind of needed that. The Calyrex, it is in its situation of choice, but now you're staring down 3 Pokemon. The Iron Hands, if you go for the Drain Punch, I don't think you're going to be healing up nearly enough damage past these Glacial Lances to even, like, it wouldn't matter, but oh man.
See if Calyrex can do it all of its own. Gonna have to take this Wild Charge, and it hurts a decent bit, but I think it's about to get its revenge.
All right, here we go. Glacial Lance coming on out. The Urshifu, good for this go around, but the Iron Hands, it did great in getting critical hit to take a KO. It can finally earn its rest. Agati now down to 2. Trick Room situation. It is a chilling Knee Boost, which is a little bit dangerous for this Calyrex. And sure, there has been the Terastallization, so not the most damage is coming on out. But if this Miraidon doesn't follow up with the KO, it could get a little weird.
Yeah, now Nevin is no longer weak to those moves. Unless the single attack boost is enough to get a one-hit KO on this Miraidon, which would likely require another critical hit. A big electric type attack the other way could close this game for Agati.
Well, it'll be the Glacial Lance. See, get a critical hit. The Urshifu goes down. Miraidon takes a lot of damage, but it's not going to be enough. Holding on, gets an opportunity to fire back. The Calyrex, sure, you got another chilling Knee Boost, but the Electro Drift is headed your way. Terra boosted. It's got to go down, and with that, Gabriel and Agati to take a great win in this 2-1 series.
Yeah, you can't ask for a much closer match between two of the world's best Pokemon players of all time. Sort of a strange ending, but a really well-played set that went back and forth the whole way through.
Got out a little bit of weirdness. We already saw Iron Treads, and we couldn't have that be the weirdest thing we've gotten to see, but it's still really, really good match and really, really close one between these two. And it was crazy that we got to see out of all things that Iron Treads here in that game 3, and where it was kind of able to open up this window of opportunity considering